Hi there, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit to you 1301 students about paper number 3, as well as information I've posted and things going on from now through the end of the semester. So it is November 18th right now, Wednesday. Your paper is due on November 22nd by 11:59 p.m. I do want to grant you an extension of 2 days only if you email me. So I'm not granting an automatic extension, but I know those 2 days may be helpful to some people. And I'll talk about why in a little bit. So please email me if you want that extension. That's about all I can offer because I'll be grading these papers and then you have another paper and project coming up after that one. So just let me know by email if you would like 2 extra days for this. Um, Let me talk about your paper and some general things I saw. Now, I have finished reading everybody's paper individually. I've been working on these for about a week now, as you know, and many of you have opened your papers as I commented on them. I finished a lot today. I've been working on them since very early this morning. So I really suggest strongly and urge you to go ahead and open and read my comments because everybody, of course, has different individual comments. I'm going to be looking over at my other screen for general information, though, that I would like to tell everyone since this is a research paper. Okay, your thesis. Your thesis must take a position. Many of you wrote a factual statement about your topic that was not a position. And this paper is called Arguing a Position. You're taking a stand. You have a stance on it. You're for or against it. You're not somewhere really in between. So a lot of people wrote about abortion. And there were actually a few papers that I didn't quite know what stand you were taking on that. And that's the same with some of the other topics that came up as well. Um, Make sure it is the last line of your introduction paragraph. One other thing about your thesis is it does not need to have all of the reasons listed in it. And of course, I mentioned that to some of you on your individual papers. Only 25% of your paper should be directly quoted from sources. Remember, you need 3 secondary sources. 2 of them should come from at least one of the library databases. There are 20 databases. Some of you counted all of the databases that we have, and I didn't mean for that to be a trick question. I never would have asked you to count to 486 databases on that quiz. But we do have 20. So if you didn't find everything you needed from the Gale opposing viewpoints, you could go to some of the others and get more information. You do need some quotes in a research paper. So you need to balance the number of quotes you have with what you paraphrase, with what you argue on your own, and also with what you remove from long quotes. When you remove words or phrases from long quotes, you use what's called ellipses, and that is 3 dots, basically 3 periods with a space in between, to signify that you have removed words. When you do that, the sentence should still make sense, though. You're only removing what is not important to the meaning of that particular sentence. Necessarily mean you haven't plagiarized. I have seen examples of plagiarism in these papers. Like I have seen some in prior papers before this, but nothing like I've actually seen in these. And I believe some of it is what would be considered accidental plagiarism. That is, I've seen some students put quotation marks around quotes but not cite it, or cite something but it's actually directly quoted. It must have the quotation marks. If you have a word for word quote that you're using from a research source, it must have quotation marks and it must have a reference. Make sure you go back through several prior weeks' PowerPoints and notes. So starting, I believe, in week 9, there are particular slideshows that you should reread. and that is the citation and plagiarism slideshow, the incorporating research into an MLA format paper slideshow, the actual assignment for this paper. And there may even be one more about ways to use quotes that I post this week. So be on the lookout for anything else I post in the next couple of days on this week's, which is week 13, on this week's lessons. Dictionary definitions don't count as one of your 3 sources, but you can certainly use a dictionary definition. And I've read a couple of papers that have 6 or 7 sources included, and that's perfectly fine for this length paper. Remember, the full paper from start to finish should only be 1,500 words, but it does need to be a minimum of 1,000, and that includes your works cited page. I want to tell you the difference between commentary and argument. You are writing an argument. You are not writing a commentary. A commentary is stating your opinion with very little evidence as support. Just sort of repeating your ideas, perhaps using logical reasoning, perhaps using some cause and effect, but essentially commenting on the problem without getting into all of the evidential aspects that we've talked about and that I've talked about in my notes this semester. Argument, you're using factual evidence. You're utilizing data, statistics, expert testimony, and by that I mean researched experts on your particular topic that you've looked up and quoted. You're using logical reasoning. You're avoiding logical fallacies. You're using cause and effect and definition and process and other strategies that we've talked about and that I have slideshows about. You can even use some narrative. So all of that creates argument. Remember, as Aristotle said, argument is finding all the available means in any given case of persuading your audience. Those available means are not just repeating what comes out of your head, but all of the things that create evidence and that are strategies for taking a stance and making your case. Logos, ethos, and pathos. I'm going to have more information on that next week, and I'm sure you've heard those phrases before, but they are things to think about as you revise your paper. So logos, of course, is the use of logical reason to craft your argument. It's using all of those different types of evidence that I just mentioned. Pathos is the one thing that many people are missing so far in their argument, and that is the use of emotional examples, things that will essentially tug at the heartstrings of your audience, play into their emotions of fear or curiosity or excitement or love or hate, whatever you want them to feel with that particular example. And then ethos, of course, is the way that you create your own authority and credibility. And you do that in numerous ways. One of the main ways is through your research, but it's also through things like proper grammar and sentence structure and the formal academic tone you use in your paper. So all of those come together in how you persuade your audience. It will be even more important to consider when you work on your visual analysis project. One final thing that I noticed, not that I noticed, but that I want to mention to you, is when you read your comments, you will see that on many of your papers, I have asked questions from the opposition. And what I do in all of these papers is I play essentially devil's advocate. That is, by that, I mean I give you points from the opposition that you need to consider as you create your argument. How will you refute the opposition's points? Some of you have done that very well throughout your paper. Some of you really still need to do that. And the more controversial your argument, i.e. abortion, the more you need to refute what the opposition will come back with. Okay? Your audience, let's say your audience whom you're writing to is a neutral audience that's sort of independent in their beliefs. They're willing to be swayed on either side. That's how I've always considered myself. Of course, I have my own opinions. I have my own stance on pretty much every issue that you're writing about. But my goal as an instructor, as a teacher, is to push you in the way that you're critically thinking about your argument. And that is always thinking about how the opposition could come back and reject what you're saying. So make sure that you are convincing me, that you're at the very least convincing me. There's a little bit of a variation between conviction and persuasion. To persuade is stronger. That is, if I'm so persuaded, I will go out and join the organization or work for that cause or write my senator a letter or go on social media about it. Conviction or convincing me just means I agree with you. I may not be so gung-ho about it or into the issue as you are, but I still agree. And that is your ultimate point. Okay, that is all about paper number 3. Remember, you may email me if you would like a 2-day extension. Let me talk about what's going on for the rest of the semester. So next week is Thanksgiving week. TCC is closed in terms of extracurricular activities and things like that. But I do have one thing I would like you to do for me during next week, and I'll get to that in a moment. Before I go into next week, I want to say that journal number 4 is due on Sunday night also. That cannot be extended. I'm not going to provide an extension for journal number 4. I have already posted it. So click the journal box on the left bar and you can submit your journal anytime. That will be the last journal of the semester. There will not be another quiz either. On the very first calendar of the semester, I may have had one more journal after this and one more quiz, but I've taken those off the syllabus. So journal, paper number 3. Now let's go into your visual analysis project. I have posted the parameters of the project and the assignment in next week's lesson. I've combined next week and the week after because next week is not officially a week of class. I'm not having office hours next week, for instance. But there is one short email I want you to write to me between Monday of next week and Sunday of next week. So if you want to take the whole week off, Sunday, you still have to come back and do homework for the following Monday anyway. But the email will be writing me a couple of sentences and I'll respond back to you. You don't have to do anything other than that. But it's basically me looking at you at least starting to think about the project, the visual analysis project. The next thing I wanted to talk about was notes that I'll have later to post concerning the project. I may post those next week in next week's folder. I may post those in the next